My name is Amy Bax.
And I'm Alex Heilner, and today is April 24th, 2002, about 7.5 months after the World Trade Centers fell.
And we were working at home or sleeping at home when it happened, and after it became clear that it was an emergency, not an accident, and that it was going to be a tragic situation, my first thoughts were for my family. I've been born and raised in New York, in Brooklyn, and my family has an office across the street from the World Trade Center, across the street from the graveyard, right on VC, and both my parents work there, and we could not get in touch with them at all for a good part of that morning, and I don't think I've ever felt so panicked in my entire life, except for maybe the following week when there was a really horrendous thunderstorm and we thought that we were being bombed all night. Those are two of the most terrifying times in my life.
It was a really hard time. It goes without saying, but I think what has struck me, and probably both of us to a large extent, is the degree to which the city really sort of showed its colors. And I don't mean that in such an easy way. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of people in the city. There's a lot of different people in the city, and people dealt with it differently, but overwhelmingly people dealt with it well, if you can say that. I mean, from the moments that the first, planes hit and people were evacuating, it was unbelievably thorough and remarkably calm. And even after the towers fell and, there was a real sense of horror and sadness amongst everybody, people, before the end of the day were, didn't know what to do but to try and help each other. I mean, that was absolutely clearly what was on everybody's mind, which was really stunning.
Many people, ourselves included, once it became clear that all of our family was going to be okay, rushed to their neighborhood hospitals or Red Cross centers, absolutely desperate to do anything that they could do to help. And we worked at the Red Cross a day or two later, and the calls that were coming in from across the country with people wanting to donate farm equipment and overalls and suspenders and socks
and blood
were amazing, and they were really truly desperate to be able to do that. And when you went down to Chelsea Piers and saw the lines of volunteers rotating through Chelsea Piers, hearing, we need, garbage bags. They go out to the drugstore, get garbage bags, come back. We need, Band-Aids, out to the drugstore, Band-Aids, come back, in this amazing circle of need and filling of the need was one of the most moving and reassuring things I've ever seen in my entire life. And I think what I have been struck by in the months since that event is that New York was really tested in all of its strengths and weaknesses, and one of the amazing strengths of New York is its diversity. And I see part of the reason for this event and the choice of this location in the minds of the people who orchestrated this event is a symbol of New York's diversity and strengths and power, as misguided as that power sometimes is. And it is my hope that it's the diversity that will progress us forward out of what has been a really bad situation globally and locally. And I've seen many people in the months since September 11th continue to really be desperate to find a positive step forward out of the place that we are and have been. And Alex and I made a photographic image in response to the event out of our feeling of needing to do something. And we're artists, so that's what we do, but we're also people, so there are other things that we try to do also.
I think the day that the towers fell was incredibly difficult for me as a photographer. A part of me really wanted to run downtown and document it, take pictures of everything that was happening, everything that was gone, take pictures of people in pain and people in generosity and everything. And I couldn't. I just absolutely couldn't. You know, the part of me that was a human being and a person and a resident and citizen of the city, you know, just took over, and it was far more important to me to be with friends and family and to sort of really figure out what was going on a real personal level than it was to take pictures at that moment.
Our needs became very primal.
Yeah. You know, I think I've had little pangs of regret at moments that I didn't go down and take some pictures down there because, you know, because I've seen a lot of great images that came out of there. And by great, I don't mean, you know, great can mean tragic. But at the same time, I think I knew at that moment that there were going to be hundreds and thousands of people making pictures, and I didn't feel like I necessarily had to contribute that at that point. I teach at New York University, and that was a community that was pretty hard hit. Not so much that there was a huge loss of life. Certainly, many people who worked there lost family and friends. But you know, just geographically, it's very close. Many of the students lived in a dorm that was about 2 blocks away and from the towers, and were evacuated, you know, as they fell, quite literally, and weren't allowed back in for, you know, a couple months. They didn't have their wallets and their clothing, much less, you know, their photography equipment or their books or anything else. So as a teacher, it was kind of a really difficult and at the same time inspiring time to try and be working with the students. As a photography teacher, it was particularly difficult to broach the question of how do you make art and what do you make art of? You know, a lot of students had pictures of the buildings as they fell because they had been out on the street, you know, photographing the smoke when they started to fall. So we got, you know, hundreds and hundreds of pictures of that. And at the same time, it was almost impossible for a lot of people to work. I mean, how can you know, one response was, how can I be making art when so many people have had such tragedy? But I think over the next few weeks and the next few months, you know, a certain sense of responsibility and ability to take on living in the face of so much tragedy really kind of came through. I think people started getting back to making work and making artwork in a way like they had to. I think to some degree that was what inspired us to make the card that we sent out for New Year's. I've been sending out New Year's cards for many years, and they're usually something that has something to do with reflecting on time passage and, you know, perhaps the new year. My own personal taste, which I think Amy shares to some degree, is, you know, that they be something kind of quiet and something that somebody can reflect on. And, you know, I like the idea of sending them to all my friends and people I work with, and just, you know, a little way to say hi and welcome to the new year. This year, it's, you know, we had a real debate. We didn't know whether to make a card that had anything to do with the World Trade Center or not. 4 months after it happened, there was a real feeling on the part of some people that they didn't want to think about it anymore, except, you know, how could you not? At the same time, I think a lot of people were really at that point coming to a moment of, I wouldn't say reconciliation, but some kind of facing what had happened and that life was starting to move on a little bit. I had a sense that the buildings themselves and all that they represented and the people that had worked there and the people that had, you know, and sort of the people who live in the city, they all needed a kind of voice, and they needed some way to, I don't know. I mean, there were a lot of voices in a lot of ways spoken, but I guess I was feeling a need to give the towers a little bit of a voice in their afterlife. I don't know.
So we made that picture, and it's many places now in the world and in the country and in the city.
It's on refrigerators of all our friends and neighbors, which I love. We will go around the city, and several times in a day I'll see the picture, which I love.
And we still look for those buildings every time we pass one of the places in Brooklyn or Manhattan that we used to be able to see it